On the Way to Krishna, Chapter 1 Through Way to Happiness, Part 2. We have often heard of Krishna Ras Leela with a cowherd girl in Vrindavan. That is not like ordinary exchange that takes place between these material bodies. Rather, it is an exchange of feelings through spiritual bodies. One has to be somewhat intelligent to understand this. For a foolish man who cannot understand what real happiness is, seeks happiness in this material world. In India, there is a story of a man who did not know what sugarcane was and was told that it is very sweet to chew. Oh, what does it look like? He asked. It look just a it looks just like a bamboo rod. Someone said. So the foolish man began to chew all kinds of bamboo rods. How can he begin to experience the sweetness of sugarcane? Similarly, we are trying to get happiness and pleasure, but we are trying for them by chewing this material body. Therefore, there is no happiness and no pleasure for the time being. There may be some little feeling of pleasure, but that is not actual pleasure, for it is temporary. It is like a show of lightning that we may see flashing in the sky, which may momentarily seem like lightning, but the real lightning is beyond that. Because a person does not really know what real happiness is, he deviates from the real happiness. The process of establishing oneself in real happiness is this process of Krishna's consciousness. By Krishna's consciousness, we can gradually develop our real intelligence and naturally enjoy realizing spiritual happiness as we make spiritual progress. As we begin to realize spiritual happiness, we proportionally abandon material happiness as we make progress in understanding the absolute truth. We naturally become detached from the false happiness if somehow or other one is promoted to the stage of Krishna's consciousness. What is the result? Upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain being situated in such a position. One is never shaken even in the midst of greatest difficulty. When one attains the stage, other achievement appears insignificant. In this material world, we are trying to achieve so many things: riches, women, fame, beauty, knowledge, etc. But as soon as we are situated in Krishna's consciousness, we think, oh, no achievement is better than this. Krishna's consciousness is so potent that a little taste can save one from the greatest danger. As one begins to realize the taste of Krishna's consciousness, he begins to see other so-called enjoyment and attainments as flat and tasteless. If one is situated firmly in Krishna's consciousness, the greatest danger cannot disturb him. There are so many dangers in life because the material world is a place of danger. We tend to close our eyes to this, and because we are foolish, we try to adjust to these dangers. We may have many dangerous moments in our lives, but if we are training ourselves in Krishna's consciousness and preparing ourselves to go home back to Godhead, we will not care for them. Our attitude will then be dangers come and go, so let them happen. It is very difficult to make this kind of adjustment as long as one is on materialistic platform and is identifying with the gross body, which is composed of perishable elements. But the more one advances in Krishna's consciousness, the more he becomes free from bodily designation and this material entanglement. In Srimad Bhagavatam, the material world is compared to a great ocean. Within this material universe, there are millions and billions of planets floating in a space, and we can just imagine how many Atlantic and Pacific oceans are there. In fact, the whole material universe is likened to a great ocean of misery, an ocean of birth and death. In order to cross this great oceans of nescience, a strong boat is needed, and that strong boat is the lotus feet of the Krishna. We should immediately get aboard that boat. We should not hesitate, thinking that Krishna's feet are very small. The whole universe is simply resting on his leg. For one who takes shelter of his feet, it is said that the material universe is no more significant than a puddle of water found in the impression of calf's hoofprint. There is certainly no difficulty in crossing over such a small puddle. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. We are entangled in this material world due to uncontrolled senses. The yoga process is meant to control these senses. If somehow we can manage to control the senses, we can turn our face to actual spiritual happiness and makes our life successful. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with undeviating determination and faith. One should abandon without exception all material desires, born of false ego, and thus control all the senses and all sides by the mind. Gradually, step by step, with full conviction, one should become situated in the trance by the means of intelligence, and thus the mind should be fixed on the self alone and should think of nothing else. From whatever and wherever the mind wanders due to the flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. The mind is always disturbed. It is going sometimes this way and sometimes that way. By yoga practice, we literally drag the mind of Krishna's consciousness. The mind stays from Krishna's consciousness to so many exterior objects with from time immemorial. Life after life, that has been our practice. Due to this, there may be great difficulty in the beginning when one tries to fix his mind in Krishna's consciousness, but these difficulties can all be overcome. It is because the mind is agitated and not fixed on Krishna's that it goes from one thought to another. For instance, when we are engaged in work, memories of events that happened 10, 20, 30 or 40 years ago may suddenly come to our mind for not apparent reason. These thoughts come for our subconscious, and because they are always rising, the mind is always agitated. If we agitate a lake or a pond, all the mud from the bottom comes to the surface. Similarly, when the mind is agitated, so many thoughts arises from the subconscious that have been stored there over the year. If we not disturb a pond, the mud will settle to the bottom. This yoga process is the means to quiet the mind and allow all these thoughts to settle. For this reason, there are so many rules and regulations to follow in order to keep the mind from become agitated. If we follow the rules and regulation gradually, the mind will come under control. There are so many don'ts and so many do's, and if one is serious about training the mind, he has to follow them. If he acts whimsically, what is the possibility of the mind being controlled? When the mind is finally trained to the point where it will think of nothing but Krishna's, it will attain peace and will become very tranquil. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attain highest happiness by virtue of his identity with Brahman. He is liberated, his mind is peaceful, his passions are quieted, and he is freed from sin. The mind is always concocting object for happiness. I am always thinking this will make me happy or that will make me happy. Happiness is here, happiness is there. In this way, the mind is taking us anywhere and everywhere. It is as though we are riding on a chariot behind an unbridled horse. We have no power over where we are going, but can only sit in horror and watch helplessly. As soon as the mind is engaged in the Krishna's consciousness process, specifically by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, then the wild horse of the mind will gradually comes under our control. When we must engaged in Krishna's service every moment of our lives in order to keep the restless and turbulent mind from dragging us from one object to another. In a vain search for happiness in the temporary material world, steady in the self, being freed from all material contamination, the yogis achieve the highest perfectional stage of happiness in touch with the supreme consciousness. Krishna serves as a patron for one who is devoted to him. When one is difficulty, his patron save him. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is the real friend of every living entity, and we have to receive our friendship with him. The method for reviving this friendship is the process of Krishna's consciousness. By practice of Krishna's consciousness, then passionate hankering will come to a stop. This passionate hankering keeps us divorced from Krishna's. Krishna's is within us and is waiting for us to turn him, but we are too busy passionately eating the fruits of the tree of material desire. This passionate compulsion to enjoy these fruits must stop, and we must situate ourselves in our real identity as Brahman, pure spirit. So this is all about the Through Way to Happiness chapter 1 of the book On the Way to Krishna. Hare Krishna.